Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to PMI Live. Taking out waste may not make you lean, busting myths, getting your improvement on track. Damion, you've got a lot to do today. I'm looking forward to it. I'm Susannah Clarke. I'm going to be facilitating the session today. So PMI Live, if you're new to joining us, it is a live and interactive experience. So we're going to be using all of Zoom's features for chat or Q&A, and please do use that to pose any questions that you have for Damion. And I'll find moments where I can interrupt him and share your question. We're also going to be running a case study using an interactive whiteboard, and I'll be sharing all the links for that so that you can join in with that. I can see we've already got one question in the chat, so thank you very much for that. The question was, is this being recorded? Yes, it is being recorded. We will be sending you a copy of the full recording next week. So if you do need to leave early or you want to share it with anyone who you think would find this of value, please do just share the link that we send you. Hello to everyone who's joining us on our live streams on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. We'd love for you to take advantage of these features, including us sending you the recording. So you can just register right now and come and join us. If you go to pmi.co.uk/webinars, you can come straight in. So without further ado, shall we crack on? Damion, what are you going to take us through today?
Okay, thanks, Suze. Well, today I want to talk about this kind of provocative title I have, which is taking out waste may not make you lean. And what I want to cover in the entire thing is well, starting off with lean and this concept of waste, because some people might be familiar with that watching this, others maybe not. So I just want to go through that to make sure we're all on the same page. And then since it was so popular in the last webinar I did, I've decided to use another case study, talking about a real life example of something that happened to me, and how we can look at that with this idea of, you know, customers and value. So I'll take us through that in the fortunate situation that I'm the customer in this particular case study, so I can share that with people. And then we'll get into how do we avoid some of these common pitfalls that sometimes people are making when they're trying to apply lean or use lean concepts, but actually might be causing the opposite of improvement to happen in their business. So I want to share a few examples of that, and then of course finish off talking about how you can things you can think of doing to maximize the impacts that you have if you are active in using lean concepts.
Great.
Okay.
Lovely.
So I'll get straight into it. So the concept of waste, some people might be familiar with this, and to get us into this space, I'd like to jump straight in with an exercise. So if we can share the Miro link with people, and just while we're organizing that, we'll be asking you to think about, what do you value most about your mobile device? So mobile phone, if you don't have one of those, maybe you could substitute that for a laptop or something, but I guess these days most people pretty much have got a mobile phone. So have a think about that just while we're sharing the link.
I've shared the link in the chat, and I'm just about to put the password in as well.
Perfect.
So the password's now in there. So everybody, you should be able to see that link in the chat feature of Zoom. And then you should also then be able to see the password, which I've typed in there as well. If you put those both in, then you'll be able to come and join us.
Perfect.
I can see people
turning
arriving, which is great. If you've got a problem or you can't make that work, just let me know and we'll get some help for you.
Yeah. So you can see we've got a bunch of sticky notes on under the heading, what do you value about your mobile device? And to interact with these, just double click on one of the sticky notes. You should see it then have like a blue corner, and then you can start typing away and put your text in there. So I can see people are busy writing away. All right, I'm just going to set the timer for this. We'll just have a couple of minutes, I think, and then we'll share the output. Fantastic. So when did you get your first mobile phone, Suze?
Do you know, I was trying to think about that the other week, and I've got a feeling, I want to say it was something like, oh, I was going to say, realize how old I am. It was in the 90s, but
Oh,
I've got
okay.
a feeling it was like 92, 93. I mean,
Oh,
it was the
wow.
brick, it was the
Wow. Yeah.
brick.
That was super early. Yeah. I don't think I got one
You're
until it was
so
about 2001, maybe. I
You're
was
so
quite a late
young,
joiner to the
Damion. You're so
party.
young. And can I just say, when I first got my mobile phone, I used it to make phone calls. And the very idea, I could not understand why anyone would want to send a text message. What a
Yeah.
stupid feature, I thought. How times have changed.
Indeed.
Half the time, the problem is we just use text messages and we don't phone people.
That's true. Very true. Wow, we're getting lots of interactivity on this one. Fantastic.
I love GPS for golf. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, we've got a few more. Well, we've got another 40 seconds left. Yeah, if people want to find a blank and type away. I'm not going to attempt to try and organize these live. I think we'll just sample a few and then move on. Okay, zooming on these ones. What's that say? Convenient, lots of things in one place. Email, mobile banking, maps. Yeah. Activity. Battery seems to feature quite a lot.
Yeah, well, if you've got one that runs out, particularly when you're using it for something like maps, and you find that you now are stuck somewhere, those two are essential, aren't they?
Indeed. Okay, so that's time up on that one then. So let's have a quick skim through these. So we've got things like having lots of things in one place, to do things like banking and maps and so on, access to social media, of course. Battery life's featuring quite a few times there. Camera, I've noticed, is been written quite a few times as well, especially these days, aren't the cameras are so good. Messaging, navigation features, and so on and so on. Ability to pair with car sat nav. Yeah, GPS, again,
Oh,
another common feature.
if you scroll out, one of our very kind participants has affinitized them at the bottom.
Are they really?
Yeah, if you go down,
Oh, wow.
thank
Crikey.
you very much, Lawrence. Excellent.
Excellent. Well,
And
fantastic.
also,
You can
let
you can come again.
Yes, yeah. Well, they've got an AI bot that does that, so I think we're going to have words afterwards.
Ah.
That's fantastic. Well done.
That's great. There you go then. So perfect. Okay, so now if you've got that Miro board open, just keep it open in your browser because we're going to come back to this board later and do something else. So don't close it down. If you do, you can come back to the link in the chat and we'll reopen it for you. So I'm just going to go back to my slides and talk about why we've done that. Why have I done that exercise? Well, the thing about value is we often associate that word with costs. We use that in everyday, people say, well, is that good value? How much was it? How much was it? But value to customers is much broader than just a price tag. And customers value a whole range of different things with regards to the products we provide them and the services that we offer. And a few suggestions on this slide, it could be that they might value the quality of the products or service. That it could be something about price, but it's often things like convenience, availability, the options it has, the features, and so on. And this is really the starting point for doing lean. And that's because once we've understood first who our customers are, and then secondly, what do they truly value about the products or services that we currently give them or provide them from our business, then we're in a great position to start to scrutinize the work that takes place today. And we could begin to categorize it into these three camps. So there might be work that we do that we can say is directly contributing value based on what the customers helped us understand what they value about product or service. But we should probably find that an awful lot of the work that we currently do might fall into one of these two other categories. The other one is called necessary non-value add. It's things we have to do. The customer doesn't really care about it, but maybe we just have to do that. It's necessary for us to operate the current process, or maybe legislation, regulation says we have to do things a certain way. But what we're really trying to do with lean is find this stuff in red, this non-value add, or what we often tend to refer to as just waste. This is activity that adds no value to the customer and actually adds no value to the business either. Ideally, we would want to try and get rid of it. So most people have this understanding about lean and they go off and go, great, let's go and find some waste. And some of you might be familiar with this model called the 8 wastes. So these are 8 typical things that are nearly always categorized as that red waste in any business, whether that's manufacturing or service. And to help you remember these, we say if you use this word downtime, you can start to remember the 8 wastes.
I'm just going to put a link in the chat to everybody as well for this, because we actually got a toolbox on the 8 wastes. So if you find this helpful or you're not familiar with it, that link is now in the chat, and you can have a look at that, and you can scroll down at any time and it'll explain downtime for you in the future.
Thanks, Suze. So I want to talk you through a case study. Now pay attention to this, because when we get to the end of this, I'm going to be asking you to get involved again as a group. And this was an annual process that happens, and I'm sure this happens in many of the districts and councils around the country too, certainly in the UK. And it's this garden waste subscription. So I have a garden waste bin that means that all my garden waste gets recycled. And once a year, we have to pay a small subscription to allow us to use that service for the forthcoming year. So back in May, I got a letter through telling me that I hadn't yet upgraded my subscription for the forthcoming year, and would I still like to do so? And in that condition, it meant that I wasn't able to put my bin out. There's a sticker that you put on your bin that says, that's very colourful, that says you paid for this forthcoming year. And if that sticker's not on the bin, they won't touch it. You can put it out as often as you like. They just leave it there. So I was a little bit annoyed at this point, because I should have renewed this in April. And I'm kind of giving away there how much gardening or lack of gardening I often do. But and this was now May, right? And my bin at the time was absolutely full of garden waste. So that was a little bit annoying from the get-go, is that, why hadn't I been notified about this earlier or sooner, or maybe in a different form? But nevertheless, I followed the letter's advice and proceeded to go to our website to make the payment. So the first thing I did was try to go to the website and type in the address that was on that letter. And it took me to a page, not this one, it took me to a page of the 404, page not found error. So then I had to go to their homepage and navigate through a whole series of different links to find the right bit of their website, because this is a council, it's got all sorts of things on there. Find the right bit for the garden waste subscription. It then surprisingly wanted me to tell them who I am, name and address, which is a little bit peculiar given that they've just sent me a letter to my address. So you'd think that maybe part of that information was known already, but nevertheless, I carried on, filled it in. That took me to another page, which then was asking me about the number of bins I would like to subscribe to. Now, I always just have one, so that was pretty much standard. And it tells you down there in green, if you notice, it tells you what the price is for a single bin and what the price is if you want to add additional ones on there. So I entered one and clicked the next button, which took me to another page. This one really just seemed a bit pointless. It was just reaffirming something I already knew, that was that I was going to be paying £38. But nevertheless, so I click submit again, and that takes me to another page. Now this one's the payment page. Of course, they need my payment details. That seems sensible. So I've got the space at the top to put the card details in. And then beneath that, annoyingly, they now want me to fill in my address yet again. So now I've got to type in all that same information for a second time, which starts to get a little bit annoying. I then get taken to a confirmation page, which again, what value is this to me? It's just telling me the same information I've already been told now twice, but I guess it's just reaffirming that. And then click the confirm button. It takes me through to a waiting page. Of course, customers, we never like to wait for anything, do we? So wasn't too pleased with that page, although it was only 30 seconds. And then I get to the end, where payment complete, get a little reference number, and that's the end. But is it? Well, no. I still can't put the bin out, can I? I haven't got my sticker that enables me to do that. 8 days later, my sticker finally arrives when I've missed not only one, but now 2 collections of my waste bin, which is still sat there full of garden waste and the grass growing to sort of knee height in the backyard. So a pretty slow process for this day and age would be my personal view. Okay, so but a relatively straightforward process. Now, if I'm the customer of this process, let's assume that what's of value to me, the value add characteristics are that I'm notified before my subscription expires so that I don't get into this situation where the bin can't go out. And the second requirement is that I want this reordering process to be as quick and simple as possible. And the definition of simple here would be maybe as minimal inputs from me as is feasibly possible. So I want to put everyone on who's dialed into this in the position of an improver and see if you can come up with any suggestions for us. How could they have improved this process in light of my value statements there on this page? So we're going to go back tomorrow for this. We have a space organized for you just over to the right hand side of where we were last time. So you should see it says garden waste subscription, and I've split this into two halves. So I've got solutions on the green stickies, which are how could they do a better job of notifying me perhaps before my subscription expires, and the blue sticky notes are for how could they maybe simplify that reorder process to minimize the inputs. So let's give you I think just maybe a minute on this one because everyone was so quick last time. So
maybe a couple
countdown
of minutes.
timer for a minute.
Let's go halfway between the two. I've just also put the link and the password back into the chat just in case anyone did come out of Miro, and you just joined us and you've missed the original chat. So that should be in there. So everyone should be able to get into there now.
There you go. I've just clicked the bring everyone to me button as well. Just so I could see a few people off the page. So hopefully you can see the part of the board we're working on.
Yeah.
Which is great. I'll just turn off those. I know we haven't given you very long for this, and to be fair, I'd already started the timer, Suze, before you said give them more time. So we've still got some good solutions coming out. So just another 10 seconds. And then we'll have a quick scan through these. All right, we've certainly got some very creative souls for a end of the week. So we've got plenty of ideas. Okay, so notify me before the subscription expires. We have RPA, which I guess is robotic process automation for SMS or text or email. So yeah, basically automating the notification prior to subscription. Maybe an app notification, it's a good idea. Again, text or email coming up a few times. So this one says subscription by email or text and use hyperlink to prevent searching website. Yeah, indeed. And again, SMS. So, okay, cool. And then on the reorder process, right, so a QR code to scan links to your account. What a great idea.
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, create an account with all the data. Yeah, recurring membership and direct debit automate. Yeah, I think we were talking about that one this morning, Sue, weren't we?
Yeah.
Why don't just do it automatic and opt out if you don't want it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, auto renewal again. That's coming up a few times. Change process. Assume it continues until you notify them. Yes. Email you that if they don't hear it will renew. Yeah. Okay. Very, very similar themes. Have we got anything different? Print the sticker notice. Populate.
I wondered about the print the sticker because again that would I was thinking when you were talking about that would be great, and then I thought I wonder if they're worried that is open to misuse, so I could print the sticker and give it to my 20 neighbors.
Yes,
I wonder if that's why they don't do that.
That could well be the case. Yeah, pre-populate your details and so on. Looks like they had two systems, hence the repeat information. Yes,
we've got an extra one in the chat saying, what about an initial screening? Presumably up front at the point when you register, because everything that's in here, as Paul rightly says, assumes that everyone has access to the internet. So if we think about some people who obviously don't, for whatever reason, there could be some form of initial screening to determine the preferred contact method. So if that was available.
Yeah, there was actually a discussion on a radio station recently talking just very much about that. Certainly for the older population, just this assumption from many businesses that everything's now online. And of course, that's not how certainly a lot of the older generation operates. So there's a big discussion about that. It's fantastic. Some really, really good ideas there. So there you go. You're all signed off. You're all lean
the one
practitioners.
that there's one going in right now which says scrap charges for having to dispose of garden waste. Yes,
that's true.
Why does the process even exist for charging?
Yeah. Maybe just add it on to existing council related payments like council tax or something. Yeah, indeed. Really good, very good. I may actually pass these on to the local council and see if they see what they think of those. All right, very good. So on back into our slides then. Okay. So some of the pitfalls then, what problems can we run into when we're doing this kind of thing? We're trying to tear out waste. Well, firstly, there's lots of things that happen in various different organizations and industries that cause them to be non-lean. They do the opposite of being lean. And here's just a few suggestions on bullet points. So, leapfrogging, constantly reprioritizing jobs over others, causing other jobs in the system to get stuck or but get held up. Giving the customer functions or features that really they don't value because they don't use them. Or starting jobs before they're really needed to keep everyone occupied, often driven by utilization metrics. In fact, we're due to release a Uncommon Sense podcast on that very topic in the not too distant future. I think it's me talking about that one.
It is.
So these are all things that we can do that would take us away from being lean, but the pitfalls I'd like to talk about are actually when people are trying to make their business lean. They're doing something intentionally on purpose, but yet still may lead to a situation where they're not necessarily making their business leaner. So let's get into those. So let's take this first example. We've got a fairly straightforward 3-step process here. And we've got the rates of output described in terms of minutes. So that could be something like every 2 minutes, step 1 finishes a job and passes it over to step 2. Step 2 is producing things every 10 minutes, and step 3 is every 5. This could be an office-based process. It could be a manufacturing one. It really doesn't matter. And the little graphics I've put down at the bottom in color there are to represent that maybe this is a fairly high-level view. These could be separate departments. The purple department is completely different to the blue, which is different to the orange. And in those situations, it's likely that those localized teams might want to look for waste in their bit of the process, the part that they run on a daily basis, which makes sense. But the output of this entire process would be that the customer is only going to receive something every 10 minutes because you're only as fast as your slowest step is one of the statements. So we could say that step 1 is overproducing to step 2, okay, which is one of those 8 wastes we just looked at on the earlier slide. So that's a problem itself. That's going to cause inventory to build up, as in work that's not getting processed in front of step 2. Inventory is well a waste. That work is going to have to wait, which is also a form of waste. And step 3 might be being starved of work every sort of 5 minutes because it's being fed only every 10, which might cause them to switch to other sorts of work. So let's say that in this situation, there's already quite a bit of waste, but step 1, the team in step 1 have decided to go and look at how they do that work, and they found some waste in there, which is going to speed that process up from, instead of taking 2 minutes, maybe it's going to come down to a minute. So they would quite rightly celebrate, saying, fantastic, we've applied some lean thinking, we've taken out some waste, we've made the business leaner. But after the change, the customer is still only going to be receiving 1 item every 10 minutes. From their point of view, from the customer's point of view, nothing's changed. And actually, what's even worse is what's happening now in front of step 2 could be getting worse, right? There's going to be even more inventory piling up, even more delays and so on. So instead of, we've kind of taken waste out of one part of the business, but we've caused it to get even worse somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so this is a really common pitfall that people run into when they're not necessarily thinking of what we might call the entire value stream. They're looking at things in too much of maybe a siloed fashion or a localized fashion.
I've also just put a link in the chat, which was about knowing your internal customer, which about, is this scenario, isn't it?
Yes, indeed, yeah.
To understand, so who is your customer, perhaps internally, and what do they need from you?
Yes, in fact, I'll come back to that point, Sue, so that's going to come back up later on too.
Okay.
Pitfall number 2, let's take a similar scenario. We've got that 3-step process again, and let's say the customer needs 4 whatevers a day, just as a standard rate. Now this series of processes is being fed by a supplier. That could be another internal department, it could be an external business, and there's variation in the rate at which, or the number of things that this supplier provides on a daily basis. You can see there that it's bouncing anywhere from 12 maximum down to as low as 1 on day 12. So to mitigate against this variation in the supply, the only way that that 3-step process can maintain this constant 4 per day to the customer would be to hold some planned inventory in front of their process. Yeah, this could be, again, queues of orders maybe, or physical stock in a warehouse if you're in that kind of business. So as much as we could say that's waste, technically it is, but it's serving a purpose. It's there intentionally. It's planned waste. Planned inventory. Now, the mistake we could make here would be to foolishly say, well, all inventory is waste according to the model, therefore we should get rid of that. Now, we could get rid of that and claim that we've freed up some trapped cash in terms of cash flow perspectives. But really, what have we achieved if we were to lessen the quantity of inventory there? Is all we've really done is we've now exposed that 3-step process and the customer, more importantly, to this root cause problem, which is the variation in the supply. So I've probably said this before on previous webinars, but my advice to clients is always, when it comes to inventory reduction, start off fat and happy, as in don't be too concerned about having too much, and go on a diet, reduce the inventory only as a consequence of tackling the variation or the consistency of the supply. Dealing with that will enable you to become less dependent on the inventory, and that's the correct way to reduce it. So just going in there and slicing it out, believing that that's lean, though, isn't it? That's what I'm supposed to do? Probably not. Okay. Pitfall number 3 is a common one, is jumping to automation. So there was actually a couple of suggestions on our exercise, wasn't there, about maybe going to things like robotic process automation. Yeah. And it's so common these days. It's so, it's even got to the point where these some of this robotic process automation can be programmed in-house. You don't have to get the experts anymore. You don't have to be a coder or anything like that. So it's no surprise that it's very tempting for people to go to that as a kind of a solution. Number one, the risk always with this is to think about, are we at risk here of automating a process that is actually full of waste? And that doesn't really make sense if we were to be investing time and effort and maybe even costs into this automation, which is really then permanently trapping that waste in the process forever. And I've even seen instances where if we take the waste removal approach, sometimes that mitigates the need for the automation at all, because it radically improves the throughput rates or the amount of effort required. So that's another thing to watch out for, is don't always rush to automation. Think about the underlying process first, and have we done all we can to strip out wastes? And then, of course, absolutely consider this. The 4th one is one that I see very often, especially when I'm delivering training, and it's this classifying the wrong activities as value add. So there seems to be a temptation, or maybe it's just a bit of a natural human trait, that we want to say that everything we do is value add, and there's very little waste there, otherwise we'd have done something about it. The truth, sadly, is it's probably the other way around. I would challenge everyone to say a large proportion of your day jobs is in truth probably either necessary non-value add or perhaps even waste. There's a very small fraction that's truly value add. And a very common area that people get quite hung up on is when they have inspection. We're checking other people's work to make sure it's correct. And there's an awful lot of that happens in all industry. And of course, people see value in that because what it's doing conceptually is it's stopping an error or a defect finding its way into the hands of the customer, which then could become very expensive or have a big implication on, the brand image and so on, the reputation. But Lean would say, and maybe even Six Sigma would say, why do we have that defect in the first place? If we had better, more reliable, robust processes, and there's all sorts of tools and techniques we can use to get to that, we could be less dependent on inspection. We can even maybe reach a condition where we can eliminate it altogether, or maybe reduce it down to, sampling one in every, instead of using it as a safety net. And the other problem with inspection is it's fallible. People miss things anyway. And so mistakes will still find their way through to the customer. It's a pretty not a very robust mechanism for controlling quality, let's say.
No, but it's an understandable one, isn't it? Particularly depending on, if you are working in an industry where the impact of a defect can be significant. I was thinking about, talking about the company that we work with who build engines for large shipping vessels. The impact of defects in those can be phenomenal, could even result in the ship going down. And therefore, first position was we should inspect everything. So huge growth in the quality department so that they could inspect everything. And almost once they got into the habit of it, it became a safety blanket, and very hard to then get out of that, to believe that it was going to be okay, that they could ship an engine without it needing to be inspected.
Yeah. I think, if you really get into the guts of process standardization, and this idea that, if we find the best way of doing some work and we demonstrate that that is the best way because it delivers a predictable output, that's, you get into when you really start to get into that, you start to understand this is believable, actually, that we can get away from relying on someone having to check something, because we know that, so long as we follow that standard, we know what we've created before we've even finished creating it. It's a really, really interesting concept. Number 5, again, is very, very common across different companies, and it's this drive to cut costs. And of course, all businesses are interested in controlling costs. It's, if they're not making a profit, that can, obviously be unsustainable. So it's not surprising to find that probably all businesses have at least one eye somewhere on how we were going to keep the costs down or cut them. But just going out and just doing cost reduction exercises, and some businesses, that is their improvement program, it's to just go out and chop out costs, can be quite damaging to how a business operates. And it really shouldn't be confused with lean. Lean is very much a different concept of, addressing things as not value for the customer's purpose, and actually trying to achieve better flow of value to the customer. So often, without much foresight, chopping out random costs can actually do the opposite for the customer. It can lessen the effects of a business's ability to deliver those value, to deliver against those value aspects for its customers, which doesn't make any sense when you think about that. If the customer, the external at least, is the people buying that product or service is the reason we exist as a business. Why would we want to do something that would take away from what they truly value? It just doesn't add up. And they often say that, if you do lean well, the costs will actually follow, because taking out waste will inevitably reduce how long it takes. It will reduce defects, reliance on inspection, all these things we just mentioned. So actually maybe focus more on doing lean well, and I'm sure those costs will follow.
And also the cost-cutting piece can have an internal face only, can't it? So, I remember being in an improvement team, and we were looking at the strategy for the year, what we were going to do, and of course post-it notes came out, and so we had all these packets of post-it notes delivered to the meeting room. And we started to use them, and we started to, write something on each post-it note, stick it up on the wall and so on. And within about a minute, gradually those post-it notes just fell off the wall. Yes. And everyone sort of looked around and said, well, what's happening? And then somebody looked at the post-it notes and realized that they weren't from that original supplier that we all know very well. And eventually we had to stop, and then we had to get sellotape out, and then we had to start sellotaping them. So it took us a hell of a lot longer to actually do what we needed to do. Everyone was a bit dissatisfied. And the head of improvement, director of operational excellence, was in the room and went marching off to procurement to say, could you please stop providing us internally with these particular form of sticky notes, because they don't work and it's slowing us down. So
that's
it was never getting to the customer even, but it was actually not. The cost cutting was having the reverse effect, because actually in the business, the people are some of the most expensive assets that they had.
That's it. And you could argue, couldn't you, that you don't need much training to go cost cutting. You just need a P&L sheet and go through it, start scribing stuff off, so, and then hope for the best afterwards, which just maybe not wise. So they're just a few pitfalls. I mean, there's plenty more we could talk about forever, but I just wanted to give a flavor for some of the things. So how do we then avoid those? How do we maximize the impact of the lean improvements that you might already be undertaking or maybe about to undertake in your business? So so the first one is to, as you've probably gathered, is to look at the work, assess the work that you do from the customer's perspective. Walk in their shoes, stand in, imagine what it's like, or maybe even go and be the customer for a day, if that's even possible. Go and experience what it's like. And this also applies to internal customers too, which Sue's mentioned earlier, which I'll come back to actually. So we need to really carefully define what do they truly value, or what are the characteristics that's most important to them. And certainly for larger organizations, I think that you might need to then help internal teams to make sense of, well, how do they contribute to that? What's their value proposition, as we would call it? Because some people are very far removed from the direct service or product offering, and they might think, well, this is nothing to do with me. But in fact, there should be a linkage all the way through there, no matter what your role is. So help them to consider or interpret, what do those requirements mean to those people? And then, of course, you can challenge the way that you do the work today against those requirements. And a great question to ask is, especially when you're doing things like process mapping, is to challenge every single step and ask what's its purpose in lieu of this customer value statement. What's the purpose of this activity? What does it do with regards to what the customer wants? And if you can't answer that, if you're going, well, we don't know really, it's just sort of something we've always done, or it's the procedure tells us to do it, that's why we do it. Maybe that's a waste. That's probably a waste. It's something that you could at least start to challenge. So that would be a little tip there. The other one, of course, to avoid things like the first pitfall would be to look at the bigger picture. So to really try and understand from the business perspective, what's the entire end-to-end process looks like that's trying to deliver value. So we can make sure that if we make a change in one area, it's not going to sub-optimize another one. And there's lots of approaches around that. So there's things like customer journey mapping, very common in service organizations. Value stream mapping is a really, really common tool that works across industry to help us understand, what are the high level steps and what are the performance of those, and we can start identifying high level ways, maybe even identifying projects from that point of view, and system maps as well. So another technique that PMI often use. And just a point there on the second bullet point, I've been in quite a few businesses where people are, looking to get involved in improvement, or they've done some basic training, they want to go and cut their teeth. And then they discover as a surprise that, oh, actually, someone has already done a value stream map of our business. It's tucked away in the improvement team over there. So go and ask around. This analysis might have already been done. And therefore, you can check in then to make sure that, all the projects that you're hoping to launch linked back to that analysis. So they're going to help it to move forward as opposed to the opposite. And there you go. The point I knew was in here somewhere. Don't forget about internal customers. So the trick with internal customers, so this might be, the department that just carries on with the work after my department's finished, and then they might pass that on to another department, and then eventually it gets to the final customer. So you can make a lot of improvements by making their life better as well, by thinking and doing the exact same approach. What do they value about the product or service in that half finished state that they receive it in? And it might be things like, the way in which it's presented to them, the accuracy of the information they get. Maybe they're getting far too much information. It's just clumsy and over the top, and they only need these vital bits. But when you do that, you just have to remember that you've got to consider what they value, but not let that contradict something that the final paying customer values. Okay, we don't want to substitute one for the other. So that can be a little bit more complicated. But yeah, the idea of if we could all help our internal customers, the people who receive the product or service that our bit of the process does, and we work to try and make their life better, and they do that for their internal customer, and so on and so on. That whole chain is going to start to work far more effectively, and the external paying customer is going to feel that, because that's going to affect probably almost certainly something that they value, certainly in terms of on-time delivery, accuracy, defect-free, and so on.
And this applies absolutely across the sort of any of the, what we might call support processes, for instance. So many teams aren't talking to each other and don't know. And when you get them together, that sort of epiphany moment, I didn't know you did that with it. Oh, okay. It's such an enlightenment, and it changes everything for how those teams work together.
Yeah, I've had that many times where people who even sit in the same office had no idea that their work was actually connected, So some tips. I think if you're just starting out with, Lean or Six Sigma, and you just want to go and do something, I think working at a local level, pulling out some obvious sources of waste is not a terrible idea. It's a great place to start, and you're going to get a lot of learning from that. However, at some point, the business needs to consider that bigger picture view to make sure that we get the real, true benefits from those efforts. Otherwise, as we've seen with the pitfalls, we might end up just be causing more change to occur elsewhere, and then that needs resolving. And sometimes you can have lots of smaller initiatives that are all roll up together to deliver a much larger objective. So again, things like system mapping, value stream mapping, they can often be the starting point for that. For instance, we might say we've got a defect reduction exercise in several departments, and collectively, that's going to mean that the quality for the final customer is far more exemplary than it's ever been. So you can join them up like that, and normally that would be the job of an internal improvement manager, improvement coordinator, something like that, who should be coordinating all of those activities to make sure that they add up to the objectives we're trying to hit at the company level. Okay, so a summary then of what we've covered. So in order to do Lean, as we've said, it's really essential that you understand the true customer requirements. And there's lots of different techniques that you can approach for that. I'm sure we've done webinars and podcast episodes on that front. Suze will enlighten me as to which ones we can point you to. Customer requirements need translating to all areas of your business so that people can understand how do they contribute towards it. And like we said, starting off small and local, short term is fine, but longer term, at some point, let's get the bigger picture plan in place. Let's make sure that we're maximizing these efforts. And truly really is ultimately a way of thinking as opposed to just a series of random activities. So I think it's great to do Lean's often pigeonholed as something we just do inside a project, or we just do an event, and find some waste, and great, we've improved. But truly really is a way of thinking and describing how a business, an entire business, can operate. So in the industry that I came from in particular, over a very long span of time, we went from Lean being this, just again, very much like I've described, just something that a handful of people did inside projects, to really becoming the way in which we operated on a daily basis. It was just endemic in all managers and leaders. So things like, using visual management, using the right measures, having structured problem solving, doing lots of effort on 5S to maintain physical environment just became a way of working, and it just started to become habit.
Yes.
So that's certainly something
and one of our people at guest attending today has made the point about Gemba walks as well. That going to Gemba to actually see their work happening in its place.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So Susan, we'll hand over to you.
Thank
I think
you,
we've got
Damion.
a slightly early finish.
Thank you very much, Damion, and thank you everyone for your participation in the exercises today.
Yeah, really good.
In terms of next month, so we have a very special episode. Many of you who have joined us for webinars, who've listened to our podcast, who've attended our training, you may know Barry Byrne. Barry Byrne is a brilliant consultant. He's been a director consultant with PMI for many years now. Originally also came from the aerospace industry like Damion, and he's retiring. So he is going to make a special appearance on PMI Live to talk about all of those things he's passionate about, generating motivation within teams, encouraging improvements, achieving results that people couldn't possibly have imagined. So come and join us as we say farewell to Barry and listen to some of the insights that he's had in his career. Also, in terms of other content we've released this month, we have our latest Leading Business Excellence podcast. This is with Vince Desmond, who's the CEO of the Chartered Quality Institute. So really interesting conversations in there. Importance of purpose, again, referring back to what you were talking about earlier on today, and how rising customer expectations are driving the need for all of us to step up our game. So a great listen. Do look out for that. You can find it on our Knowledge Hub. I think there's a QR code as well that you can click to find all of this. We've also introduced a series of mini-sodes. So these are bite-sized episodes on particular topics. You can see all of these. These are all now available. And in terms of our On Common Sense podcast, we've had several episodes out this week, and you can see, this month. And you can see, of course, Damion featuring in 2 of them around scatter diagrams, around how that helps you visualize relationships, and also the 5 whys and that as a mindset, as well as Warren talking about how to get the best out of your sponsor. Fabulous episodes. I really do recommend them to you. I have put a few links in today's chat, and what I will do is ensure that those are included when we send out the recording at the end. Obviously, do look out for the Voice of the Customer survey. You're going to be getting that shortly. We love your feedback. We check it all the time, and we use it to think about new topics for next time. So please do take a couple of minutes just to send that back to us. We are really grateful to hear your voice. So I think that brings us to the end of today's PMI Live. So on behalf of PMI, Damion, myself, I'd like to thank you for joining us, and hope that you can join us next month for next month's PMI Live, as I say, with Barry Byrne. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.